So thank you, Owen, for inviting me. Good morning, and it is a real pleasure to be here. I'm the Director of Children's Services in the Royal Borough of Windsor and Maidenhead, and that means where the Queen lives. So we get lots of visitors from around the world. 7 million visitors come to the Royal Borough to see Windsor Castle. But as the Director of Children's Services, we're slightly differently organised in the UK, and there are 152 of us that you would need to deal with, but we are responsible for children's education, their health, and those who need to come into our care. So we brought all of that together in a way that hopefully means that education, social welfare, and health take joint responsibility for looking after children. So I have a phenomenal job. I do. I have a great job. I love my job. My family sometimes might think I love my job more than I love anything else. And hey, they'll move on and my daughter will grow up and she'll love things more than me. So at the moment, I get to enjoy my job lots. So on to what I'd like to say today. I am often asked to come and talk to groups of children in care. Why wouldn't I be? I'm a token child in care who's now a Director of Children's Services. But no matter what the gathering and what's the purpose, I always try to talk to young people about the future and their role in it. I invite them to look around the room and to look around the room at themselves, their peers, and those who are here to look after them and to hopefully nurture and steer their lives. Here today we're joined by a wide range of people, from the minister all the way to your advocates and your child welfare officers, who will be there to take you through your lives. But I do tell them to think forward to their 20s, to that time in the main when everyone in this room will have moved on, and we'll be working with another group of 15 and 18-year-olds, and therefore a time when I'm afraid to say that you'll be forgotten. And it's really important that we think of that, because we will be forgotten, and people won't see us as youth in care anymore. They will see us as citizens, and we need to make sure that we prepare ourselves for that, and to make sure that we're prepared to actually go forward and be really successful, regardless of the background that we've had. I generally don't tell them all the things that they're going to have to confound to actually achieve that. So, for instance, I don't tell them how many of them are likely to be homeless, and I know your statistics aren't much different to ours, but in England, 19% of adults showing up in hostels used to be in care. I don't tell them of the number of young people who are 21 and in the youth justice system. Shamefully, nearly half of them used to be in care. I don't tell them how many of them won't be in work because they don't have the educational qualifications. Fewer than 20% of young people in our care system have the basic education qualifications to go on. Or that only 6% of them, compared to our nearly 40%, go on to university. I don't give them those numbers, but we should every day, because we need to enable them to know what they're going to have to achieve. But I do ask them to think about their lives when they're no longer in care and they have to care fully for themselves. I look around the room and I do try to gauge and connect with the people, but quite often I do notice that they're not listening. Because they see me as old. I am, as Erwin said, it was a long time ago we came here. I dress like this. I'm a Director of Children's Services. So people think, yes, she's just another one of those adults telling a story, talking to us. I understand, and to be honest, when I was 17, I probably would have not been listening at that point. But it is really important that you keep meeting people who do succeed, people who have had to go forward and achieve. And sometimes it's important for them to tell you their story. So I often do tell the story. I often remind them that at 10 years old, I went to a school for children with emotional difficulties. I got expelled from that school at 15. And therefore I had 2 more years of formal education left. I was expelled because I was quite rowdy and I was quite opinionated. And I used to tell people that quite a lot. People who know me now don't see that as so shocking. When I was 16, I lived in a children's home, and at that point, they didn't bother putting us back into education. What they did was they got us to volunteer. Generally, I was a woman, so I went to a play group. I had no formal education, no qualifications, no link to my family, and a history of disruptive behaviour, and I had no life plans. I do tell you this because I want you to know I have been where you are, and it is really difficult. But you have to realise, if you want to become a successful independent adult, it is in the main you taking control of your lives. Because whilst there are a lot of people that will help, no one else can do that. You have to be that change. Then I look at all the adults in the room, all those usually foster carers, residential workers, we've got ministers here, we've got advocates, we've got sponsors, all sorts of people. And I do wonder about their understanding about yours and our lives and their motivations. Of course, everyone in this room is here because they care, and the motives are right. But I do wonder if the young people in this room were their children, if they would be advocating something very, very different. It's a hard fact to bear, but many people who talk about supporting children in care would not accept for their own children what they accept for children in care, for those that they're charged with looking after. I think there's evidence to confirm that many... Thank you. There is evidence to confirm that many professionals think it's enough for children in care to be removed from the previous negative experience and to be cared for by the state. I wonder if subconsciously they think that as long as they remove the child and care for them, they're being successful in their job. Why wouldn't you? You've removed a child from a terrible experience. Rather than doing what we actually should be doing, caring about them. For me, though difficult to achieve, and it is difficult, success is simple to define. To succeed, we succeed, I succeed in my job if our youth in care develop into successful adults. I do say develop into, not being developed into. It's an important distinction. And what do I mean by successful? And I'm not getting complicated here. Successful means what you expect for your children, what I expect for my daughter. Being able to make and sustain effective relationships. Knowing how to be healthy and safe. Knowing how to remain positive in spite of difficulties. Have what is required to be economically independent, because that's what we all want. I think about the adults in the room, what they would be asking for their own children, what they would say or write to me as the director if they thought their child wasn't getting the access to a high-quality education. And I know this because many parents write to me daily. So why is it that we don't demand for some of our children in care, in many cases, children who have been damaged, who have really been affected? Children in care are victims of adults' behaviour. Adults who have raped them, starved them, beaten them, sold them, and so on. We all need to stop blaming children in care because they don't settle. They don't respond well enough to us. They don't achieve first time in education. They don't respond to the love of a foster carer suddenly for the first time. They become addicted to drugs. They become teenage parents and parent their children badly. Children who are abused don't get fixed overnight. without proper support, and usually proper support costs a lot of money. We try to fix children without really investing in them. We remove them and we think that's the fix. At the weekend over dinner, I was challenged by a foster parent who's a friend and also a head teacher. It was a nice challenge, as you do over dinner. The challenge was about, what do I really do to make sure when a child comes into care, we understand their full needs and we wrap services around them? What therapeutic intervention do we give them so that we then don't have to deal with it when they become an adolescent? What do we do to ensure the right support is there? I think the challenge is right. I think we've focused too much on getting the process right. Do we take a young person into care in the correct way? Do we then place them in the right place? But for me, what we need to now focus on is, do we build the relationship with the child or young person that we've just removed? Do we understand what's really happened to them? Do we understand what they saw through their eyes? Or do we just want to say, well, we've fixed that now, we've taken them out of that negative experience? We must keep reminding ourselves that children are victims, not to keep them as victims, but to remember that. So when they're 15 and they annoy us, or we think they're not responding correctly to us, we realise they have had a long history of a difficult situation. It's really important to me that we remember, especially those 15-year-olds, because it's really easy to see the 6-year-old who needs to come into care and treat them really differently. They're small, they're squidgy, we want to look after them. Suddenly they're 15 and they become the problem. And that's how we often talk about it. I think we also need to remember that 15-year-olds, or as our young people get older, they experience adolescence, something we often forget. So, compound adolescence in that turmoil of feeling confused, frustrated, wanting to push all the boundaries, to also feeling empty, unloved, lonely, unsure of your own identity. Those two things coming together at that time make for very powerful emotions. And actually, that's often what we're meeting in our young people. One of your own young people said it, Shana Allen. She was taken into care at 8, it says. She thinks I've got to stop in a minute. I'm really sorry. I'm trying. But she clearly said, when you've got no control over your own life, it takes a huge mental and physical toll. You don't feel loved, valued, or accepted by others. You simply feel helpless. And when young people feel helpless, they reach out to other things. They try to find things that make them feel valued. Often, they start to get addicted to drugs or alcohol. Sexual abuse happens further. All those things, vulnerable young people expose themselves to being exploited. And this is what we're finding in England now. So many of our young people in care, suddenly between 15 and 18, are hugely vulnerable and being exploited by more adults who want to find vulnerable young people to exploit. Sometimes it helps to take a moment and think about the last child who came into your care, just to remember that's what they went through. Last week, I had to approve 4 social workers going into a school to collect a boy. We first took him into care from his parents who were abusing him, placed him in an emergency placement. Then we placed him with a loving foster parent who we thought was going to be his permanent home. 3 months later, we found that foster carer was emotionally abusing him. We had to go to the school and remove him. T is 6. How would you cope with having everything taken away from you in an instant? You don't even go back home and collect your stuff. Being taken to a council office and introduced to a new set of foster carers and being told, get on with it. How would that feel? I know most adults who would call in sick for several weeks because that would happen to their life. But somehow we expect our children in care to manage that. And maybe because we know they've had such a difficult time and they've survived. It's that resilience that actually get young people through the system. So where to next? I lay out to everybody, for those who work for me, is that we must set our highest ambitions for children in care. and run the risk of failing short of achieving them, then reduce our expectations and achieve less. Setting low expectations has dire consequences for children in care. We don't expect enough and therefore we don't get enough. We need a paradigm shift and a system shift if we're to do better. Put simply, we need to put more energy into understanding why young people respond as they do. We need to see our role as having a partnership with young people. But that in our partnership, remember, we are the parents, and therefore we will tell you we don't agree with you sometimes, and that you can't do things, because that's what I bring to this partnership. Our role in their lives is to do everything we can to enable them to take ownership of their lives. We need to reduce those things that we do as individuals and the system does, which makes that more difficult. Recently, an adoptive parent who tweets quite often with me and causes my staff lots of difficulty says that he now understands what's the difference between a failing system and an outstanding system. And the outstanding system is the one that focuses on relationships, partnerships, and conversations. The failing system is the one that focuses on timescales. That's the focus of the day. We discuss how we make sure that children are the focus of our work, and I know we would all say they are every day, but how are they really? How do we really make sure that they are the pivotal focus of our work, and that we enable them to understand how they are in charge of their lives? No one in this room, and me included, achieved anything until I wanted to. You all have personal narratives about how you got to where you got to. I see my 15-year-old who, however much I told her she needed to study, didn't study, until suddenly she realised her friends were studying and were going to achieve more, and she made a paradigm shift in what she wanted to do. And now she studies. 6:30 in the morning yesterday, she was up for her exam later in the day. I can't believe what's happened. And in my own life, I had to make a shift. I was 17 and on a bus on my way back from working in that playgroup, and I decided I needed to change my life. My decision was, did I become a teenage parent or did I do something different? I chose something different. And from then on, everything in my life has stemmed from. That decision informed so many other decisions. I know that I couldn't have done it without the adults around me at that point, and the adults who were responding and having a conversation with me. For me, it's about ownership, and ownership is so important because from it becomes a sense of direction, higher levels of self-esteem, confidence that's not bravado. From that becomes resilience and self-regulation, which is what we all need to be successful adults. So we need to work on how we construct our systems, processes, and relationships with children and young people to foster that sense of ownership with them. In particular, we need to improve the way children and young people are making decisions that affect them. We need to do more than just nod that we agree with Article 12 of the UN Convention. You signed it, we signed it. 25 years ago, we said we would involve those children in decisions about their lives. We made that decision, commitment, but we haven't really delivered on it. How do we expect children to do well in the adult world where they need to make decisions 100 times a day, where we don't enable them to experience making decisions and being successful or not successful? They need to do that safely now, like our own children are allowed to do that safely without judgment. Just as we do with them, we need to allow our children in care to do that. If we do what we've always done, we'll get what we've always got, and that's plainly not good enough. I'm sure we can do better. We have to. Thank you very much.